They excluded me from the will reading. My wife's family, who always treated me like an outsider, made sure I knew I wasn't welcome. Sarah, my wife, looked torn, but she didn't argue when her sister Brenda, with her usual sneer, said, "This is family business, Mark. You are just a guest." A guest, after 10 years of marriage to their sister. A guest at the reading of my mother-in-law, Eleanor's will. The woman who, in her final years, I spent more time with than her own children. I remember standing there on the porch of Eleanor's old house, the one they all grew up in. It was a beautiful fall day, crisp and clear, but the air around me felt thick with resentment. Brenda, Mark Jr., my wife's brother, yes. Another Mark, which always annoyed me, and their spouses were all there, dressed in their funeral best, looking somber but also, I suspected, eager to see what they'd inherit. Sarah gave me an apologetic glance, a quick squeeze of my hand that felt more like a warning to behave than a comfort. Then she disappeared inside, leaving me on the outside, literally. I didn't fight it. What was the point? They'd always been like this. From the moment I first met them, I was the odd one out. Not rich enough, not from the right family, not successful enough in their eyes. They barely tolerated me, even though I loved Sarah more than anything. I just stood there, watching the door close, feeling the sting of rejection. It wasn't just about the will. It was about years of being marginalized, years of feeling like I was never quite good enough for their precious family. I walked to my car, got in, and just sat there for a long moment, staring at the old house. I thought about Eleanor. She was different. She had a kind of quiet warmth that her children lacked. We bonded over gardening, over old movies, over her stories of growing up. She never judged me, never made me feel small. In fact, she often seemed to listen to me more than her own kids. She'd invite me over for tea, just us, and we'd talk for hours. I truly missed her. I started the car, pulling out of the driveway, feeling a mix of sadness for Eleanor and a simmering anger at her family. I drove home slowly, the quiet of the car amplifying my thoughts. I wondered what they would get. The house, probably. Eleanor had a few investments. Nothing huge, but enough to make a difference. They'd probably split it equally, and then use the money to upgrade their already comfortable lives. I tried not to be bitter, but it was hard. I was halfway through making a sandwich when my phone rang. It was an unknown number, a local area code. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was a telemarketer, but something made me pick it up. "Hello, this is Mark." A professional voice, calm and clear, replied. "Mr. Johnson, this is Arthur Davies, Eleanor Vance's attorney." My heart jumped a little. "Oh yes, Mr. Davies, I just left the house. I wasn't invited to the reading." I tried to keep my voice neutral, but a hint of sarcasm probably slipped through. "Yes, I am aware of that, Mr. Johnson," he said, and I heard a slight pause, as if he was choosing his words carefully. "However, I needed to speak with you urgently regarding Miss Vance's last will and testament. The reading that just concluded was merely a formality for the primary beneficiaries." Primary beneficiaries? Primary beneficiaries? What was he talking about? "Okay," I said, my brow furrowing. "What about it?" "Mr. Johnson," he continued, "I need to inform you that according to the terms of Miss Vance's will, dated 6 months prior to her passing her entire estate, all assets, properties, and holdings have been bequeathed solely to you." The phone almost slipped from my hand. I gripped it tighter, my knuckles turning white. "I am sorry. What did you just say?" My voice was barely a whisper. "The entire estate, Mr. Johnson. It's all yours. Miss Vance made a very specific and unambiguous decision in her final will. There are no other beneficiaries mentioned for the bulk of her assets. She left only nominal sums to her children and grandchildren, stated as tokens of remembrance, but the entirety of her significant wealth, including the house, all investments, and personal effects, is legally yours. My mind reeled. It had to be a mistake, a joke. But Mr. Davies's voice was firm, professional, utterly serious. Are you telling me Eleanor left everything to me? Not Sarah, not Brenda or Mark Jr. Precisely, Mr. Johnson. Her instructions were very clear, and she took pains to ensure there could be no dispute. She had it thoroughly reviewed, and she was in full sound mind at the time of signing. I have all the documentation here. I'd like to arrange a meeting with you as soon as possible to discuss the next steps in probate. I stood in my kitchen, a half-made sandwich forgotten on the counter. The phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone after Mr. Davies hung up. The world had just tilted on its axis. My wife's family had excluded me, made me feel like nothing, and all along Eleanor had left me everything. The house they grew up in, the money they were undoubtedly already calculating how to spend. It was all mine. It felt unreal, like a bizarre dream. And the first thought that crashed into my mind after the initial shock was, how on earth was I going to tell Sarah? And how would her family react when they found out? This was going to be a disaster. A monumental, family-shattering disaster. The phone call from Arthur Davies replayed in my head on a loop. The entire estate, Mr. Johnson. It's all yours. It felt like a line from a movie, not my real life. My hands were shaking so much I couldn't finish making the sandwich. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the wall, trying to process the sheer absurdity of it all. Eleanor, my sweet, quiet mother-in-law, had disinherited her own children and left everything to me, the outsider. Why? Why would she do something so drastic, so explosive? I tried to call Sarah. No answer. She was probably still at Eleanor's house, wrapped up in the post-will reading discussion, probably talking about how they'd split things up. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. I imagined them, Brenda, already mentally redecorating the living room, Mark Jr. tallying up the investment portfolio, their spouses nodding along. They had no idea, and the thought of their faces when they did find out, it was almost overwhelming. I paced the living room, running through every interaction I'd ever had with Eleanor. Was there a hint? A sign? She was always so pleasant to me, so genuinely interested. She'd ask about my work, my hobbies, things Sarah's siblings never bothered with. She'd complain sometimes about how busy her children were, how they rarely visited. I always thought it was just the usual parental lament. But maybe it was more. Maybe she felt truly neglected, truly alone. I had often dropped by her house just to check on her, bring her groceries, or fix a leaky faucet. Her own kids, living much closer, barely lifted a finger. I remembered one time she'd had a bad fall, and I was the first one she called. I rushed over, helped her up, and then called Sarah and her sibling. They took their time getting there, making excuses about prior commitments. I stayed with Eleanor until they finally arrived, hours later. She had held my hand that day, and her grip was surprisingly tight. "Thank you, Mark," she'd whispered. "You are always here." I tried Sarah again. Still nothing. My mind was racing. I needed to see Mr. Davies to understand the specifics. I called his office back, left a message asking to meet as soon as possible. He called back within minutes, suggesting we meet first thing tomorrow morning. I agreed, my voice still a little shaky. The next few hours were a blur of nervous energy. I couldn't eat, couldn't relax. I tried to prepare what I would say to Sarah, to her family. How do you tell someone that their deceased mother effectively cut them out of her will and gave everything to you? There was no gentle way to deliver that news. I thought about the will reading. The lawyer had said it was a formality for the primary beneficiaries. That meant he already knew and the family didn't. He just read the part that gave them their nominal sums and left out the rest. That seemed like a cruel way to handle it, but maybe he was just following Eleanor's instructions. Maybe she wanted them to be hit with the full force of it. Finally, late in the evening, Sarah came home. She looked tired, a little drained. She tossed her keys on the counter. "Rough day," she sighed, collapsing onto the sofa. "Brenda's already planning how to renovate the kitchen in Mom's house. Mark Jr. wants to sell the stocks and put it into some crazy investment scheme." She rubbed her temples. They were arguing about it for hours. So petty. I sat down opposite her, my heart pounding. This was it. "Sarah," I started, "we need to talk." She looked up, sensing the seriousness in my voice. "What is it? Did something happen?" "Yes, something did. While you were at the will reading, I got a call." I took a deep breath. It was Arthur Davies, your mom's lawyer. Sarah frowned. "Why would he call you? He knows you weren't there. He just read the will to us." "Called me because Fee here is something he didn't read to you. Something very important." I paused, letting the tension build, knowing there was no easy way to say this. "Sarah, your mom Eleanor, she left her entire estate to me." Sarah just stared at me, her mouth slightly open. Her tired expression slowly morphed into disbelief, then confusion. "What are you talking about? That's impossible." "She left us each a small remembrance, a family heirloom, and then the rest was to be split equally." That's what he read. "No, Sarah, that's not what he read. He read part of it, the part about the small remembrances. He told me the will specifies that the bulk of her assets, the house, the investments, everything substantial is mine. Explicitly mine. She cut you and your siblings out of the main inheritance." Sarah slowly stood up, her face pale. "You are lying. This isn't funny, Mark. This is sick." "I am not lying, Sarah." He called me directly. He said the will was unambiguous. "I am meeting him tomorrow morning to go over the details for probate." Her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness for her mother, but of shock and anger. Why would she do that? Why would Mom do that to us? To me? To her own children? She started to pace, her voice rising. "And why to you, of all people?" "No offense, Mark, but you are my husband, not her child." "This makes no sense." "I don't know why, Sarah," I said, feeling defensive. "I am as shocked as you are. I have no idea." But he was very clear. He said she was in her right mind, and she made sure it was legally sound. Sarah stopped pacing and stared at me, a new unsettling look in her eyes. "Did you do something? Did you manipulate her? Were you talking to her behind our backs?" She was old, Mark. She was vulnerable. The accusation stung. "Sarah, how could you even think that?" "I cared for your mom. Yes, I spent time with her when you and your siblings were too busy. I helped her when she needed it. I never once asked her for anything, never suggested anything like this. I swear on everything I hold dear, this is a complete shock to me." She looked away, visibly struggling. "My family is going to lose their minds. Brenda will have a fit. Mark Jr. will be furious. This is going to destroy everything." Her concern wasn't for Eleanor's final wishes, but for the impending family chaos. "I know," I said softly, "but it's done. It's what she wanted." "We'll fight it," Sarah declared, her jaw set. This can't stand. There has to be a way to contest it. She was coerced or confused or something. We'll get a lawyer. This is our inheritance, Mark, not yours. Her words, our inheritance, hit me hard. It wasn't just about the money for them. It was about their perceived right. And now, that right had been stripped away by their own mother and given to the man they always considered an outsider. The depth of the family's rage when they found out would be unimaginable. I knew then that the peace in our lives, and possibly my marriage, was about to be shattered beyond repair. The morning meeting with Arthur Davies was surreal. He sat across from me in his impeccably tidy office, a stack of documents on his desk. He went through Eleanor's will line by line, confirming every detail. Mess, a small sum to each child and grandchild, a token gift of specific items, like a watch or a piece of jewelry, but then a very clearly worded clause stating that the entirety of my remaining assets, both real and personal property, cash, investments, and all other holdings, shall be bequeathed solely and unconditionally to Mark Johnson, my son-in-law, for his steadfast kindness and unwavering support in my final years. She was very precise, Mr. Johnson, Davies said, sliding a copy of the will across the desk. She even included a separate affidavit, witnessed by myself and a notary, affirming her sound mind and the voluntary nature of her decision, explicitly stating that she had not been unduly influenced. She anticipated this might cause contention. My eyes scanned the document, reading Eleanor's elegant signature. It was real. This wasn't a dream. It was a calculated, deliberate act by a woman who clearly felt let down by her own children. Did she ever say why she did this? I asked, my voice still filled with disbelief. Davies leaned back, a pensive look on his face. She didn't explicitly state why in the will itself, beyond what's written there. But in our private conversations, she expressed a deep sense of neglect. She felt her children were preoccupied with their own lives, their own ambitions, and rarely made time for her. She often spoke of your visits, your help, your genuine interest in her well-being. She felt you were the only one who truly saw her, truly cared, not just about what she could provide. He paused. She said she wanted to ensure her legacy, her home, went to someone who would truly appreciate it, and who had earned her trust and affection. She said you were family by choice, not just by marriage. Those words hit me hard. Family by choice. It brought a lump to my throat. Eleanor really saw me, and she wanted to make a point. A very loud, very clear point. What happens now? I asked, looking at the lawyer. We begin the probate process. It will take some time, but given the clarity of the will, it should be straightforward. I've already informed the family of the full contents of the will this morning, as was required. And as expected, they are not pleased. Not pleased was an understatement. As I drove home, my phone started to ring incessantly. It was Sarah, then Brenda, then Mark Jr., then Sarah again. I let them all go to voicemail. I needed to compose myself before facing the storm. When I finally pulled into the driveway, Sarah was waiting on the porch, her face streaked with tears and red with fury. Her phone was still clutched in her hand. "Mark!" she shrieked, rushing towards me before I even shut the car door. "What have you done? What have you done to my family?" "I haven't done anything, Sarah," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "This was your mother's decision." "My mother's decision?" she scoffed, pushing past me into the house. She was clearly manipulated, brainwashed. How else could she do something so cruel, so vindictive? Just then, the front door burst open again. It was Brenda and Mark Jr., their faces contorted with rage. Brenda's husband Gary and Mark Jr.'s wife, Lisa, were right behind them, looking equally furious. "You snake!" Brenda screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You groomed her. You took advantage of an old woman. We knew you were no good, a gold digger." "Brenda, stop it," Sarah interjected, though her tone was weak. "No, Sarah, I won't stop." Brenda advanced towards me, her eyes blazing. "This is our inheritance, our mother's legacy, and this leech has stolen it." Mark Jr. stepped forward, his fists clenched. "We're going to sue you, Mark. We're going to contest this will. T, here is no way this stands up in court. My mother would never do this. She loved us." "If she loved you, Mark, why did she cut you out?" I shot back, my patience wearing thin. Their accusations were cutting deep. Why did she specifically leave everything to me, stating it was for my steadfast kindness and unwavering support? "Because you manipulated her, you bastard," Brenda shrieked. "You isolated her. You filled her head with lies about us." "I filled her head with nothing but genuine care," I retorted, my voice rising. "I was there when you weren't. I visited when you were too busy. I listened when you wouldn't. And if she felt neglected, that's on you, not me. Don't you dare." Mark Jr. lunged forward, but Gary, Brenda's husband, stepped in front of him, holding him back. "Control yourselves," Gary said, though he too looked furious. "This isn't helping." "It's not helping?" Brenda screeched. "Our mother's house, our mother's money, everything is gone. To him, to the man who wasn't even allowed at the will reading. What kind of sick joke is this?" Sarah was crying openly now, torn between her family's fury and the man she married. "There has to be a mistake," she sobbed. "Mom wouldn't do this to us." "There is no mistake, Sarah," I said, looking directly at her. "I met with Mr. Davies this morning. He confirmed every detail. Your mother made sure this will was ironclad. She even included an affidavit anticipating a challenge. Then she was senile." Mark Jr. spat. "She was not in her right mind. Mr. Davies said she was in full sound mind," I countered. "He said she specifically took steps to ensure there could be no dispute." Brenda let out a wail of despair and rage. "We'll spend every penny fighting this. You won't get a cent, Mark. You hear me? Not a single cent." The room was filled with their accusations, their grief, and their overwhelming sense of betrayal. I knew deep down that their grief wasn't for Eleanor's passing, but for the loss of what they felt was rightfully theirs. I looked at Sarah, her face a mask of misery. This wasn't just about money. This was about a lifetime of complex family dynamics exploding into a firestorm. And I was standing right in the middle of it. The accusations of manipulation stung, but they also fueled a growing resolve within me. I didn't ask for this, but Eleanor clearly intended. And now I had to find out why, truly why, she felt such a profound need to disinherit her own children and pass everything to me. This wasn't just about an inheritance. It was about a message, a final, powerful statement from Eleanor. And I intended to understand it. The immediate aftermath of the family confrontation was a deafening silence from Sarah's side. They went home, their threats hanging in the air, leaving Sarah and me in a house filled with tension. Sarah was still angry, but her anger was now tinged with a deep sadness and confusion. She kept asking, "Why, Mark? Why us?" I didn't have a good answer for her, not one that she'd accept anyway. "I told you, Sarah," Eleanor felt neglected. She spoke to me about it often. "Neglected?" Sarah cried. "We called her. We visited. Okay, maybe not every single week, but we had lives. She knew that." "Sarah, How many times did you miss a family dinner with her because of some other plan? How many times did you cancel on her last minute? How many times did you leave me to go check on her when she wasn't feeling well? I didn't want to throw it in her face, but I also couldn't pretend their neglect didn't exist. She flinched. That's different. That's just life. It doesn't mean she should cut us out of her will entirely. She knew we were her children. We're her blood. Maybe. That was the point, I suggested. Maybe she realized blood isn't always thicker than water. Our conversation went nowhere. Sarah was in denial, unwilling to accept the possibility that her mother might have been deeply disappointed in her and her siblings. She refused to believe Eleanor was fully in her right mind, even with the lawyer's attestation. She believed I had somehow taken advantage, even if she couldn't articulate how. Trust between us, for the first time in our marriage, felt fragile. The next few days were difficult. I started the probate process with Mr. Davies. He advised me to change the locks on Eleanor's house and to inventory everything. He warned me that Sarah's family would likely file a formal challenge, but he remained confident in the will's legality. I went to Eleanor's house alone on a cold grey morning. It felt strange to be there, knowing it was now legally mine. The air inside was still, filled with the faint scent of Eleanor's perfume and dried flowers. I walked through the familiar rooms, the quiet house now feeling like a giant puzzle. Why me? Why this specific devastating message? I started in her study, a small room off the living room, where she kept her books and an old writing desk. This was where we often had our tea. I remembered the comfort of sitting there with her, listening to her quiet stories. I decided to start my own investigation, not for legal reasons, but for personal understanding. I needed to know the why for myself, for Sarah, and for Eleanor. I started carefully, respectfully, going through drawers. Old utility bills, tax documents, nothing unusual. Then I found a locked wooden box in the bottom drawer of her desk. It wasn't hidden, just neatly placed. I remembered seeing Eleanor with a similar box once, holding it protectively. I tried a few keys from a small dish on her desk. One of them, a tiny ornate brass key, fit perfectly. The box opened with a soft click. Inside, neatly stacked, were several old photo albums, a collection of letters tied with a ribbon, and a small leather-bound journal. My heart beat faster. This felt significant. I opened the journal first. It was Eleanor's handwriting, neat and flowing. It wasn't a daily diary, more like a book of reflections and notes, dating back about 10 years. I started reading slowly, carefully. The early entries were mostly about her late husband and her grief. Then they began to mention her children. At first it was subtle complaints. Sarah cancelled dinner again. Brenda too busy for lunch. Malk Jr. promised to fix the leaky faucet weeks ago. These were the things I'd heard firsthand, things Sarah had brushed off as normal. But as I read further, the tone shifted. There was an entry about a family vacation they had all planned. Eleanor was excited, but then Brenda suddenly pulled out, saying she had a work trip. Mark Jr. followed, citing an urgent family matter. Sarah and I were supposed to go too, but then Sarah changed her mind, saying it wouldn't be fun without her siblings. Eleanor ended up going alone. Such a disappointment. They didn't even call to check if I was enjoying myself, as if I didn't matter. Then came entries about money. Eleanor was a frugal woman, but she had a comfortable retirement. She wrote about Mark Jr. asking her for a large loan for a business venture that never materialized, and the money was never repaid. She wrote about Brenda constantly hinting about needing money for home renovations, implying Eleanor should contribute. And then a recent entry from about a year ago. They tried to convince me to sell the house. Said it was too much for me, that I should move into a smaller condo. But I know what they truly wanted. They wanted to sell it and split the profits. This house is my sanctuary, my memories. They have no respect for my wishes, only for what they can gain. This was deeper than just neglect. This was exploitation, a calculated disregard for her wishes and well-being. My blood ran cold reading this. This wasn't the image her children projected, the image of dutiful if busy offspring. This was the raw, painful truth of a mother realizing her children saw her as a burden. Or worse, an ATM. I flipped to the last few pages of the journal. The entries from the last 6 months were particularly telling. She wrote about her declining health, and how I was the one who drove her to appointments, who sat with her in the waiting room, who listened to her fears. She wrote about the conversations with her children, how they brushed off her concerns, how they were always too busy for her. Mark is the only one who truly listens. He sees me, not just an old woman. He is the son I never had. The last entry, dated just a week before she passed, made me choke up. My decision is made. They have shown me who they truly are. They care not for me, but for what I possess. Mark, however, has given me comfort and peace. My legacy will go to the one who deserves it, to the one who proved to be true family. I closed the journal, my eyes blurry. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't manipulation. This was Eleanor's final, heartbreaking declaration of love and disappointment. She had been observing, analyzing, and enduring their behavior for years. And then she made her decision. A decision that would inevitably tear her family apart. I now held the key to understanding that decision, a truth that would expose the true nature of her children, and perhaps shatter my wife's perception of her own family. The journal was a revelation, but it was the letters tied with the ribbon that contained the truly damning evidence. I carefully untied the faded silk and pulled out the top letter. It was from a financial advisor, dated about 2 years ago, addressed to Eleanor. It detailed a meeting that had taken place, at which Mark Jr. and Brenda were present. The letter outlined a proposal to restructure Eleanor's investment portfolio, pushing her towards high-risk, speculative investments. It explicitly stated that the advisor had expressed concerns about the risk, but that Mark Jr. and Brenda had insisted, stating it was for her benefit to maximize returns. I remembered Eleanor mentioning something about her investments being handled by Mark Jr. and Brenda, and she'd seemed a little uneasy about it. I'd brushed it off then, thinking it was just elderly caution. Now I saw the truth. They weren't trying to help her. They were trying to get more money out of her. The next letter was a follow-up from the same advisor, dated 6 months later. It described the significant losses Eleanor had incurred due to these high-risk investments. The letter stated that the advisor had advised against them, but Mark Jr. and Brenda had overridden Eleanor's initial hesitancy, practically coercing her into signing the papers. Eleanor's handwritten note on the margin read, "They promised me great returns. They said it was safe." I lost so much they just shrugged. My blood began to boil. This wasn't just neglect. This was outright financial abuse. They had actively put their mother's financial security at risk for their own potential gain, overriding her discomfort. Then, I found a series of email printouts. These were conversations between Brenda and Mark Jr., not directly to Eleanor, but emails. Eleanor must have found or been accidentally copied on. The dates ranged from a year ago to a few months before her passing. One email from Brenda to Mark Jr. read, "Mom's being stubborn about the house. Says she wants to stay. We need to convince her. Think of the market value, Mark. It's ridiculous to let that much equity just sit there when we could all use it. Mark Jr. Tess' reply was even worse. I know. She's getting senile, I swear. Maybe we should just get power of attorney and sell it anyway. She won't remember. Or just make her sign some papers without her really knowing what they are. We're her children. Who's going to question us? Another email from Brenda. Did you talk to her about the loan again? I need that kitchen done ASAP. My bonus wasn't as big as I hoped, and Gary won't chip in more. Mark Jr. Ours reply. She's waffling. Says she doesn't have it. I know she's lying. She's got plenty. I'll keep pressing her. We're entitled to this, Brenda. After all she put us through growing up. After all she put us through growing up. That line hit me. What had Eleanor put them through? She was a kind, gentle woman. Was this some deep-seated resentment? It seemed they felt a sense of entitlement, that their mother owed them something, and they were willing to take it by any means necessary. These letters and emails painted a devastating picture. Eleanor's children weren't just neglectful. They were actively trying to exploit her, manipulate her, and disregard her wishes. All while pretending to be loving children. They had pressured her for money, tried to force her to sell her home, and made her lose a substantial portion of her savings through risky investments. And they did it all with a shocking lack of empathy. I found one last document in the box. A handwritten letter from Eleanor, addressed to me. It was not dated, but the handwriting seemed a little shaky, as if written not long before she passed. My dearest Mark, if you are reading this, then my wishes have been carried out. I know this will cause pain and anger within my family. But please understand, this was not done lightly. It was done out of a profound disappointment and an even profounder gratitude for you. My children, Sarah included, have shown me, time and again, where their priorities lie. They see me as a resource, an obligation, but rarely as a mother worthy of genuine love and respect. They have taken from me, not just financially but emotionally. They have ignored my wishes, belittled my feelings, and even attempted to betray my trust with my home and my savings. You, Mark, have been my comfort. You never asked for anything. You simply gave. You listened. You cared. You spent time with me, not out of duty, but out of genuine affection. You treated me like a person, not a burden or a bank account. In my final years, you showed me more true familial love than my own blood. I have left everything to you because I trust you. I trust you to honor my memory, to use what I have accumulated responsibly, and to perhaps, if you are able, help those who truly need it, not those who merely demand it. I know Sarah will be hurt. I know she will be angry. She is caught between her siblings and me, and I wish it were not so. Perhaps she does not know the full extent of her siblings' actions, or perhaps she simply chose to ignore it. I hope, for your sake, she can come to terms with this truth. If she cannot, then I pray you find peace. This is my final act of love and justice. My estate is not just money. It is my life's work, my memories, my very being. I wanted to go to someone who respects life, love, and genuine connection. Thank you, Mark, for everything. With all my heart, Eleanor. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. This wasn't just a will. It was a testament to a broken heart, a final desperate cry for acknowledgement, and a profound act of love for the one person who saw her. It was heavy, so incredibly heavy. It validated my own feelings of their neglect, but also painted a picture of calculated cruelty that was far worse than I imagined. I now understood everything. Every subtle comment, every weary sigh Eleanor had uttered, suddenly made perfect, terrible sense. Her children hadn't just been busy. They had been exploitative and dismissive. And I, the outsider, had become her confidant, her protector, and ultimately the recipient of her final, powerful statement. The weight of this truth, of these secrets, felt immense. I knew I couldn't keep them to myself. This was the reason Eleanor did what she did, and Sarah needed to know. The question was, how much could my marriage withstand this level of truth? I sat on the floor of Eleanor's study, the journal, letters, and Eleanor's final letter to me scattered around me. The weight of the truth felt crushing. I knew I had to tell Sarah, but the thought filled me with dread. This wasn't just about her siblings' behavior. It was also about her own complicity, even if it was through passive neglect or turning a blind eye. When I got home, Sarah was in the living room, staring blankly at the television. The silence between us was thick with unspoken accusations and pain. I sat down beside her, taking a deep breath. "Sarah," I began, "I went to your mom's house today. I found some things." She turned to me, her eyes red-rimmed. "More evidence of how you manipulated her, I suppose." Her voice was flat, laced with sarcasm. "No, Sarah. Evidence of why she did what she did. Evidence of what your siblings were really doing, and what you chose not to see." I paused, and then, slowly, I laid out the truth. I started with the journal entries about their consistent neglect, the missed visits, the cancelled plans, the times they left me to care for Eleanor alone. Sarah listened, her face hardening, but she didn't interrupt. She still looked defensive. Then I moved to the financial exploitation. I pulled out the printouts of the emails between Brenda and Mark Jr., detailing their plans to sell the house behind Eleanor's back. Their attempts to force her into high-risk investments, their endless demands for loans they never intended to repay. As I read snippets of the emails, Sarah's face paled. Her initial anger began to give way to a mixture of horror and dawning realization. "No," she whispered. "No, Brenda wouldn't. Mark wouldn't. They wouldn't do that to Mom." "They did, Sarah," I said, my voice firm. "It's all here. Your mother lost a significant amount of her savings because they pushed her into bad investments. They actively planned to get power of attorney to sell her house out from under her, and they called her senile for wanting to stay in her own home." I watched as the color drained from her face. She closed her eyes, tears starting to leak out again. "I knew they asked for money sometimes," she murmured, "but Mom always gave it freely. And the house, they just said it was too much for her to manage, that a condo would be better." I thought they were looking out for her. "Did you ever ask her if she wanted a condo? Or if she was comfortable with those investments?" I asked gently. She shook her head, tears flowing freely now. "Number, I just trusted them. They're my family. I thought they knew best." "They were looking out for themselves, Sarah," I stated, the hard truth hanging in the air. "Your mother wrote it all down. She knew. She felt betrayed, manipulated, and deeply alone. She wrote about how you were all too busy to truly listen to her, to see her." Then I handed her Eleanor's final letter to me. "Read this. This is her last message. This is why." Sarah took the letter, her hands trembling. She read it silently, her lips moving as she formed the words. As she read about Eleanor's disappointment, about her feeling like a resource and an obligation, about her feeling more love and respect from me than from her own children, Sarah began to sob, deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. "She called me out," Sarah choked out, looking up at me through blurred eyes. "She said I was caught between her siblings and me, and that I chose to ignore it. Did you, Sarah? I asked, my voice soft but steady. Did you ignore it? She buried her face in her hands. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe my brother and sister could be like that. I heard their comments, their complaints about Mom, their money talk, but I always rationalized it. I told myself they were just stressed, that Mom was being dramatic. I convinced myself it wasn't that bad. She looked up, her eyes full of anguish. I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't know they were actively trying to hurt her, to steal from her. And you didn't spend enough time with her to notice, I added. Not as an accusation, but as a painful truth. She spoke to me about these things, Sarah, because she had no one else to talk to. Her own children were dismissive. Sarah cried harder. I failed her, Mark. I failed my own mother. I was so caught up in my own life, in pleasing Brenda and Mark Jr., in pretending our family was perfect. I was so blind. This was the hearth-breaking moment for Sarah. Not just the loss of the inheritance, but the shattering of her idealized family image, the realization of her own complicity, and the profound guilt of having neglected her mother's genuine needs and feeling. The bond with her siblings, built on a lifetime of shared experiences and secrets, was now tainted by a truth too ugly to ignore. What do we do? She finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. What do we tell them? We tell them the truth, Sarah, I said, placing a hand on her arm. All of it. They deserve to know why their mother chose to disinherit them. And maybe, just maybe, it will make them look at themselves. But I knew this was wishful thinking. People who could exploit their own mother were unlikely to suddenly see the error of their ways. This confrontation, armed with Eleanor's devastating secrets, would not bring reconciliation. It would bring war. And Sarah, my wife, would be caught in the middle of a battle that would redefine her entire family. The next family gathering was orchestrated by Sarah. She called Brenda and Mark Jr., telling them she had something important to discuss, that it involved Eleanor's will and the allegations of manipulation. They agreed to meet, no doubt expecting Sarah to side with them, perhaps even to join their fight against me. They expected an ally, not an expo. We met at Brenda's house, which was typically over the top, meticulously decorated, a testament to her need for outward perfection. The tension was palpable the moment we walked in. Brenda, Mark Jr., Gary, and Lisa were all there, their expressions ranging from cold to openly hostile. So, what's this urgent meeting about, Sarah? Brenda asked, her arms crossed. Have you finally come to your senses about your husband's disgusting actions? Sarah took a deep breath, her face pale but determined. She looked at me, a silent plea for strength. I squeezed her hand under the table. It's not about Mark's actions, Brenda, Sarah began, her voice trembling slightly. It's about Mom's actions, and yours and Mark's. She gestured to Mark Jr., Brenda scoffed. What are you talking about? Mom was clearly out of her mind or manipulated by him. She pointed at me with disdain. No, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. Mom was in her right mind, and she chose to leave everything to Mark because of what you two did. To her money, to her home. A stunned silence fell over the room. Mark Jr. laughed nervously. What are you rambling about, Sarah? What did we do? You neglected her, I interjected, deciding to take the lead. All of you. You put your own lives, your own desires above her needs. She was lonely. She felt dismissed. That's a lie, Brenda cried. We called her. We visited. Sporadically, Brenda, I countered. And often the visits were short, rushed. You cancelled on her constantly. Sarah saw it. I saw it. And more importantly, your mother saw it. This is irrelevant, Mark Jr. spat. It's still not a reason to cut us out. It's just the beginning, Sarah said, her voice now steady, her eyes fixed on her siblings. Mom kept a journal. She wrote about how you treated her. Brenda's eyes darted to Mark Jr. A journal? What journal? She never kept a journal. She did, I confirmed, pulling out a printout of a journal entry. And she wrote about how you, Mark, promised to fix her leaky faucet for weeks and never showed up. And how you, Brenda, kept cancelling on her for lunch because you were too busy. I read the specific entries, the words Eleanor had penned in her quiet loneliness. Brenda and Mark Jr. scoffed, trying to dismiss it as an old woman's complaints. She exaggerated, Brenda said. She was always a little dramatic. She also wrote about how you tried to force her to sell her house, Sarah said, her voice firm, as if the words themselves were a painful liberation. How you called her senile for wanting to stay in her own home. Turned to Mark Jr. And you, Mark, you said you could just make her sign papers without her knowing. And who would question you? Because you were her children, Mark Jr. His face went ashen. Brenda's jaw dropped. Their spouses, Gary and Lisa, looked bewildered and uncomfortable. What are you talking about, Sarah? Brenda stammered. That's insane. Is it, Brenda? I asked, holding up the printouts of their emails. Is it insane when you wrote, Mom's being stubborn about the house? Think of the market value, Mark. It's ridiculous to let that much equity just sit there. And you, Mark, maybe we should just get power of attorney and sell it anyway. She won't remember. I placed the printouts on the coffee table. Their eyes widened as they recognized their own email addresses, their own words. The smugness vanished from their faces, replaced by pure shock and fear. And then here is the money, Sarah continued, her voice breaking a little. Mom wrote about how you asked for large loans that were never repaid, Mark. And how you, Brenda, kept hinting about needing money for your renovations, implying Mom should contribute. That's private. That's family business, Mark Jr. yelled, lunging for the emails. I quickly pulled them back. It's all here. And it's the reason your mother cut you out. Not because she was senile, not because I manipulated her, but because you exploited her. You saw her as a cash cow, not a person. You forced her into high-risk investments against her wishes, and she lost a significant amount of her savings. She wrote about that too, about how she lost so much, and you just shrugged. Brenda was openly weeping now, not tears of sorrow for Eleanor, but of shame and fury. This is a lie. You are just making this up, she shrieked, but her voice lacked conviction. It's not a lie, Brenda, I said, my voice cutting through her cries. Eleanor herself wrote a letter to me explaining everything. She said she left her estate to me because I treated her with kindness and respect, something her own children failed to do. She said I was family by choice, not just by marriage. I looked at Sarah, who was staring at her siblings, a profound sadness in her eyes. This is why, Brenda. This is why, Mark. Mom knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted her legacy to go to someone who truly cared, someone who truly valued her, not her money. She couldn't trust you with it. Mark Jr. sat down heavily, his face pale, defeated. Brenda continued to sob, clutching her husband's arm. Gary and Lisa looked mortified, their faces a mixture of disgust and embarrassment. The image they had of their spouses, of this perfect, respectable family, was crumbling before their eyes. The silence that followed was heavy, with the weight of shattered illusions and exposed truths. Sarah's family, who had always projected an image of moral superiority and filial devotion, were now revealed to be selfish, greedy, and cruel. The heartbreaking story was now fully revealed, and the family was irrevocably broken. This was Eleanor's final devastating victory, and their crushing public defeat. Confrontation ended, with Brenda screaming that she would see me in court, and Mark Jr. slamming the door as they stormed out. Gary and Lisa, looking utterly shell-shocked, mumbled apologies to Sarah and quickly followed their spouses. The room was left in a wreckage of emotional fallout. Sarah collapsed onto the sofa, trembling. "I can't believe it," she whispered, her voice raw. "They actually did all of that. My own brother and sister." "You saw the proof, Sarah," I said, putting my arm around her. Eleanor didn't exaggerate. If anything, she understated the cruelty. She leaned into me, shaking her head. "How could I have been so blind? How could I have let them do that to Mom?" "You trusted them. You wanted to believe the best," I comforted her. "It's hard to admit that your family isn't who you thought they were." The next few days were a whirlwind of legal action and emotional turmoil. Mark Jr. and Brenda, true to their word, filed a formal challenge to the will. Mr. Davies, however, was prepared. He submitted Eleanor's affidavit, her journal, and the email exchanges as evidence. The case was open and shut. The judge ruled swiftly in my favor, affirming Eleanor's clear intentions and sound mind. The will stood. The estate was mine. The legal victory felt hollow in the face of the family implosion. Sarah's relationship with her siblings was shattered. Brenda and Mark Jr. stopped speaking to her, blaming her for betraying them by siding with me and revealing their secrets. They tried to rally their extended family, but the damning evidence Eleanor had left behind made it hard for anyone to truly support them. Some relatives privately expressed their shock and disappointment at Brenda and Mark Jr.'s behavior. The hardest part was watching Sarah grapple with the reality of her family. She was grieving, not just for her mother, but for the loss of her siblings, for the idealized family she had always believed in. She spent hours crying, replaying conversations with Eleanor, seeing them in a new, painful light. She felt immense guilt for not having been there for her mother, for not recognizing the signs, for not protecting her. "What do we do with the house?" Sarah asked me one evening, her voice still hoarse from crying. "Mom's house. I can't imagine living there, knowing what she went through, and they certainly won't let us sell it without a fight, even if it's legally ours now." This was the moral dilemma. I now owned a substantial estate, thanks to Eleanor's final act of justice. But it came at a monumental cost to my wife's family. Did I keep it all? Or did I offer some kind of restitution, even to the people who had treated Eleanor so poorly? "What do you think we should do, Sarah?" I asked, genuinely seeking her input. "It's legally mine." "But it was your family home." She looked at me, her eyes clouded with pain. "I don't know, Mark. Part of me wants to just give it all away, just to be free of this nightmare. Part of me wants to rub it in their faces for what they did to Mom. And part of me just wants to honor Mom's wishes. Eleanor's wishes were for me to have it, to use it responsibly, and to perhaps help those who truly need it," I reminded her, recalling Eleanor's letter. The phone rang. It was Brenda. Sarah hesitated, then put it on speaker. "Sarah, how could you do this?" Brenda's voice was shrill. "Siding with him, that gold digger. Our own mother's will. You've ruined us." "You ruined yourselves, Brenda," Sarah replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "Mom left proof of what you and Mark did. The journal, the emails, everything. She knew. and she chose to leave everything to Mark because he actually cared for her, unlike you. That's a lie. He coerced her. He planted those emails. Brenda screamed, but there was a desperate edge to her voice. We're family, Sarah. We can't let him just take everything. You were Mum's children, Brenda, Sarah retorted, her voice hardening. And you used her, you lied to her, you tried to steal from her. You treated her like an ATM, not a mother. Mom made her choice, and I am finally seeing clearly too. I am done defending you. Brenda gasped, then hung up the phone. Sarah looked at me, her face pale, but a new resolve in her eyes. That felt powerful, she whispered. Like a weight off my chest. It was, I agreed. Now, about the estate. What do you think Eleanor would truly want? She would want it to be used for good, Sarah said thoughtfully. She loved the community garden, remember? And she always talked about wanting to support young artists. She believed in giving back. We talked late into the night exploring options. The house, while a symbol of so much pain, was also a beautiful old home. Selling it would be easiest, but Eleanor loved it. And Eleanor's letter explicitly said she wanted me to have it. I realized then that Eleanor didn't just leave me money and property. She left me a moral compass, a final instruction for how to be a person of integrity. She also left me the burden of upholding her truth and the responsibility of choosing how to honor her final wishes. The fight wasn't just about the will anymore. It was about honoring Eleanor's memory and finding a path forward for our lives, redefined by her final, profound act. The weeks that followed the probate ruling and the family fallout were a strange mix of relief and continued tension. The legal battle was over, but the emotional one continued. Brenda and Mark Jr. had become pariahs among some of the extended family members, particularly after the details of Eleanor's journal and their emails became more widely known. Their attempts to paint me as a villain failed, largely because Eleanor's own words were so clear and devastating. Sarah was still reeling, but she was slowly finding her footing. The initial shock and grief had given way to a quiet anger and a firm resolve. She had cut off contact with Brenda and Mark Jr. completely. It was painful for her, but she admitted it was necessary. I can't pretend anymore, Mark, she'd said. I can't just ignore what they did to Mum and what they tried to do to us. They're not the family I thought they were. Question of what to do with the estate became our primary focus. We decided to honor Eleanor's wishes as truly as possible. The house was the biggest piece. It was a beautiful, historic home, and Eleanor had loved it. Selling it felt like a betrayal of her memory, especially after her siblings had tried to force her to. What if we don't sell it? I suggested to Sarah one evening. What if we keep it but use it for something Eleanor would have loved? Sarah's eyes lit up. Like what? Eleanor always talked about supporting young artists, right? And she loved the community garden. What if we turned the house into a sort of community arts center? Or a space for local non-profits, with a focus on gardening or something she cared about? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Then a small smile touched her lips. Mom would have loved that. She always said she wished she could do more for the community. She looked at me, a warmth returning to her eyes that had been missing for weeks. That's perfect, Mark. That truly honors her. We began to research. It wasn't a simple undertaking, converting a private residence into a public space. But Eleanor had left enough funds to cover the renovations and initial operating costs. It felt right. It felt like Eleanor's legacy would be one of generosity and care rather than a symbol of family greed. We also discussed what to do with the liquid assets. While Brenda and Mark Jr. continued their bitter campaign against me, spreading rumors and trying to discredit me, I knew giving them any money would be a betrayal of Eleanor's trust. Her letter was clear. Help those who truly need it, not those who merely demand it. So, instead of offering them a cut, we decided to establish a charitable foundation in Eleanor's name. Its mission would be to support local elderly care initiatives, providing comfort and companionship to seniors who might be experiencing neglect, much like Eleanor had. We also decided to fund scholarships for students pursuing art or horticulture, two of Eleanor's passions. When the news of our plans reached Brenda and Mark Jr., their reaction was predictable. Outrage. They called us furious, demanding to know why we were wasting their inheritance on charity. "It's not your inheritance, Brenda," I stated calmly over the phone, with Sarah beside me, nodding in agreement. "Eleanor's, and these are her wishes, honored through us. She left it to me to ensure it would be used for good, not for your selfish pursuits." "You will regret this, Mark," Mark Jr. screamed. "You'll never be family." "I don't need your validation to be family, Mark Jr.," I replied. "Eleanor already gave it to me." I hung up. Sarah took my hand. "It hurts still," she admitted, "but it hurts less now. Knowing we're doing something good with it, something Mom would have truly wanted. It feels like she's still with us, guiding us." Our marriage, which had been under immense strain, was slowly beginning to heal. Sarah had faced the painful truth about her family, and in doing so, had chosen to stand with me, to honor her mother's true wishes. It was a difficult path, but it had ultimately strengthened our bond. We were building something new, something positive, out of the ashes of a family broken by greed and neglect. Eleanor's quiet act had not just changed my life financially. It had irrevocably altered the landscape of my marriage and our family dynamics. It was a testament, a warning, and ultimately an instruction from a woman who wanted to ensure her legacy and her truth would finally be seen and heard. And I was committed to making sure that happened. The Eleanor Vance Community Arts and Garden Center officially opened its doors a year later. The old house, once filled with the ghosts of family conflict, was now vibrant with activity. Local artists held workshops in the renovated living room. A youth theater group rehearsed in the spacious dining room. And the gardens, meticulously restored, provided a peaceful sanctuary for the neighborhood, including a dedicated section for a community garden project. It was everything Eleanor would have dreamed of. We made sure there was a small plaque by the entrance, simply stating, "In memory of Eleanor Vance, whose kindness and vision brought this dream to life." It didn't mention the will or the drama, just her spirit. The Eleanor Vance Foundation also began its work, providing grants for elderly care services and scholarships for students in need. Kept it quiet, not seeking publicity, just quietly doing the good Eleanor had intended. Sarah and I were stronger than ever. The ordeal had forced us to confront uncomfortable truths, but it had also solidified our bond. She had grieved the loss of her idealized family, but she had also found a new strength, a new sense of purpose, in helping to carry out her mother's true legacy. Her relationship with Brenda and Mark Jr. remained separate. They occasionally sent angry, bitter messages, but Sarah no longer engaged. She had found her peace. "Strange," Sarah said one evening, as we sat in the quiet of Eleanor's former study, now a small library within the center. "All those years, I chased their approval. I wanted to be part of that perfect family. And all along, Mom knew. She saw them for who they were, and she saw us. She saw you." "She did," I agreed, remembering Eleanor's letter. Her words about family by choice. That phrase resonated deeply with me now. The inheritance was no longer just a shocking windfall. It was a profound responsibility. It had given me a platform to do good, to honor a woman who had seen me when others chose not to. It had also given Sarah the courage to break free from a toxic family dynamic and to embrace a new path, one built on genuine values rather than superficial appearances. Brenda and Mark Jr.'s lives, from what we heard through the grapevine, were not going well. Their financial schemes had faltered, and their reputations within certain circles were tarnished after the truth about Eleanor's will became public. They continued to blame us, but they were increasingly isolated. Their greed had cost them far more than just an inheritance. It had cost them their family, their dignity, and their mother's last shred of affection. The experience had taught me a lot about family, about kindness, and about the quiet power of a person's last wishes. Eleanor Vance, in her quiet way, had orchestrated a profound act of justice. She had used her final moments to send a powerful message, not just about money, but about what truly matters: genuine connection, unwavering support, and the deep, often unspoken, need for kindness. My wife's family had excluded me from the will reading, believing they were shutting me out of their exclusive world, keeping me from what they thought was theirs. They never imagined that the will would be the very thing that brought me in and pushed them out. Eleanor had seen through the facade, and in her passing she had finally, definitively, chosen her family. And her choice was me. It was a heartbreaking story for them, but for me, and for Sarah, it was the beginning of a new chapter. One built on truth, purpose, and a profound, lasting love. Eleanor's legacy wasn't just the house and the money. It was the quiet revolution she ignited in our lives, leaving behind not just an estate, but a mission.